I'm Thomas Mills with Politics NC, and this is the Restless Natives NC podcast. And we have with us Anderson Clayton, chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and Travis Fain, political analyst extraordinaire. So we will have a big discussion today, and I want to start off with a little tidbit that I saw in the news yesterday. One of my favorite candidates of all time, Madison Cawthorn, is running for election for Congress in Florida. I just feel cheated. I wanted him to be a candidate in North Carolina again, and I feel like he's abandoned us. But he didn't. His entertainment value alone is worth having him on the ballot. He makes Michelle Morrow look like a fucking genius. Excuse me. And it would just be fun to have him on there. So my take on it is the Republican primaries are probably the most entertaining things we have in North Carolina, and to lose one to Florida is not, that's pretty rough. But of course it is Florida. If you're going to have to go somewhere if you're going to be a Republican from North Carolina, it has to go somewhere worse. You got to go to Florida. I mean, not North Carolina's bad, but North Carolina Republican primaries, whoo, there's something else. I mean, last time, remember what happened last time? They elected a guy who sat in porn rooms and watched himself and talk about his having sex with his sister-in-law on a porn chat. And he was their gubernatorial nominee, and they stuck with him, endorsed by almost every major Republican in the country. You can't get more fun than that. And of course, Madison was up there, last time he had to leave under a little bit of a cloud. Not only did he have to leave Washington, he had to leave North Carolina. Not only did he lose his election, he lost his whole state, had to go to Florida. But anyhow, we don't get the advantage of Madison Cawthorn anymore, but Florida does. And I just want to know, do either of you have any fun stories that you remember from Madison Cawthorn? Travis?
Yeah, I think I put that all behind me. I had to write some Madison Cawthorn stories. I was still in journalism back then. And of course, good riddance, frankly. He's Florida's problem now. There were too many times where the media ecosystem, which needs to be reserved for things of importance as often as it can be, just got derailed because, hey, did y'all see what Madison Cawthorn did? Plenty of Fridays in my life and some of my former colleagues' lives, it was, hey, you ain't got time to work on this story. Madison Cawthorn tried to bring a gun through an airport again. And it's so clickbaity and so interesting that, a media organization can't resist coverage of it. So I'm glad that's a Florida situation now. No, thank you. Hard pass.
I have to disagree, but we'll agree to disagree with that. I like laughing at Republicans as hard as I can, and Madison Cawthorn is worth a good laugh.
Yeah, except for he was a real congressman. Like he was 435th with the voting power of the United States House of Representatives.
I love Western North Carolina. I spend a lot of time out there. I got a ton of relatives out there. But they elected that guy and Mark Meadows. They kind of deserve what they get. I'm hoping that we get a chance at this time. I think there's a guy out there, Jamie Yeager, who could give Chuck, what's his name?
Chuck Edwards. Yeah.
Edwards. Yeah.
Yeah, the Republican congressman from Western North Carolina.
I want to know what Thomas is on today, because I want some of it. That was the funniest introduction to Madison Cawthorn I've ever heard somebody get. And also of Republican primaries and Mark Robinson, which I agree with, but I'm like, oh my God, that was that topped anything, Thomas. So I got to give you a round of applause for that one in my head.
Well, I got to tell you, my great entertainment is Republican primaries in North Carolina. So, we're not going to get mad, but I'll pay attention to Madison from a distance.
I mean, the other primary that we've mentioned on here quite a bit, right, would be Phil Berger's primary. And that's also is an interesting one right now for all different types of reasons still. So you're right. I think that they give it to us in handfuls, right?
They sure do.
That Berger campaign social media messaging just reeks of scared. Like, I can smell the fear coming off those tweets. It's wild. It's been a long time since I've seen a campaign where I just thought, oh, they worried, like feeling it through my phone. And There's no reason for that, right? Like that is indicative of the situation on the ground, I expect.
Well, they should be scared because if you remember, they said they teed up his son to be the congressman from there, and then Mark Walker beat him in a primary, and nobody saw that coming. Yeah. They didn't see that one coming any more than they saw Michelle Morrow coming against Catherine Truitt. You woke up in the morning assuming that Berger was going to be the nominee, and there was a runoff with Mark Walker, and I think Walker got more votes, and then won the runoff.
Yeah,
I covered some of that campaign in Greensboro. I was a reporter for the Greensboro News and Record when that started, and can confirm no one thought that anyone but Berger would win that one.
Which would leave the Berger family a little bit nervous about a primary against a guy who's incredibly popular instead of somebody nobody knew, because nobody really knew Mark Walker.
He worked hard. He got a bus, and every Republican consultant in the world is like, "Oh, buses, that's a stupid idea." So I can hear them saying that right now. But he worked. Mark Walker worked that campaign, and obviously that congressional district is of such size that you can do that. You can really work if you start early enough, and he did.
Well, and then think about more of these Republican primaries. I mean, hell, they got an accidental senator. Nobody thought that Ted Budd would end up being the senator. They thought that, I think, wasn't Andrew Brock supposed to win that? Wasn't that the primary that Andrew Brock was in? They had they had 13 people in that primary, and they wake up in the morning and this gun dealer from wherever he's from, Welcome, North Carolina. Where's he from?
Calls Travis to go to the internet.
I am definitely Googling it right now, which ought to tell you something about this topic.
But it was like 13 people in it, and it was a winner-take-all thing, and all of a sudden, Ted Budd's the damn nominee, and nobody really knows who Ted Budd is. The next thing you know, he's the U.S. Senator from North Carolina.
Yeah. What's he been doing since then? Anybody had a Ted Budd sighting?
No, he's always pretty quiet, under a rock somewhere, just like he was the entire campaign.
Right. He's a get along, go along type of guy. It's another guy. He suffers from a lack of gray matter, and he's just kind of stuck up there being a Republican stooge right now, and he's doing a good job at that. He does whatever he's told to do. He ain't got a thought in the world, and because he doesn't have a thought in the world, he doesn't have to do any work.
That primary was against Pat McCrory and Mark Walker. So
Mark Walker.
This is the Mark Walker podcast, apparently. If y'all tuned in for coverage of the 2000 and whatever congressional race in Greensboro and Rockingham County, and the 2022 U.S. Senate Republican primary, you come to the right place.
Well, the Andrew Brock, they drew Andrew Brock a district. Now that I'm thinking about it, he was state senator, and they drew Andrew Brock a district, and then everybody got into it, and Andrew Brock came in like fourth. So it's like you just never know what's going to happen in Republican primaries. Democrats are pretty most time you kind of predict what's going to happen in them.
Hell, y'all refuse to have primaries half the damn time.
No, that's not true. We have some good primaries. But our primaries are serious.
Still primaries this year, and we've not had that in North Carolina Dems history for a while because of gerrymandered ass maps that Republicans have kept giving us. So I don't know. I'm excited. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Well,
good job. I will say our Senate primary was not necessarily a big hit for the party itself. I think that at least everywhere across the state. And I think I was even shocked about this in some ways. Everywhere I went across North Carolina, people just kept asking me, when is Roy Cooper going to get into this race? And it was like everything sort of halted to see whether or not. And honestly, Mark Kelly said it when he was in state this last weekend. Roy Cooper was the most popular governor in the country in 2024. Like, it matters. And he beat Donald Trump, got more votes than him twice on a ballot. Like, the realities of what our electorate, and even on TikTok, like there were people that I watched after Roy Cooper announced, like creators on there that I had never seen before talk about politics that were like, oh, we got Roy Cooper. And I was like, what? So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting for how well he's known throughout North Carolina. and just the energy from that. But we're gonna have some pretty good primaries down ballot. I think it's hard when you don't have maps that sort of give you the ability to have primaries. Like the whole conversation right now at the national level has been about voter registration, and I'm like, every bit of a national article and what they've missed about voter registration in North Carolina is unaffiliated voters. They don't want to
Right.
talk about it. They're like, we talk about Republicans and Democrats and it's versus each other. And I'm like, yeah, well, in 80 rural counties in North Carolina right now, you do not have a Democrat that represents you. And so your best bet is to actually be an unaffiliated and vote in a Republican primary to get a different candidate. And it's just like none of that context ever makes it out into the ether about like what North Carolina actually looks like on the ground in communities sometimes.
I'm glad you said that. You know, that's one of the things I've thought a lot about. They break down a lot of that stuff by gender. Well, they don't break it down by race and gender, but they don't break it down by age. And if you look, I don't know for sure, but I suspect a disproportionate number of those those unaffiliated voters are going to be under 40 years old. And
Yeah.
those are Democratic voters for the most part, you know, and it's just younger people that are coming into politics just aren't registering with parties generally. And
Also, because
it
parties
doesn't mean that they're not going to vote for them. What'd you say?
So it's also because parties aren't typically the people that are registering folks to vote right now. Like, that
Right.
has been a
Right.
historical, at least since I've been involved with Democratic politics. But I think about it and I'm like, you have to be. Like, the way that I got registered to vote for the first time was through Watauga County Democrats. And it's them being on a college campus and them being the ones that can look at you and say, you know, a Democrat is Obama, a Republican is Trump. Which one are you? Like, and I actually heard people talk about it, like the folks I talked to this last weekend that had been on college campuses registering students to vote, like, or registering their nephews or their nieces or their kids to vote. Like, that's how they explained it to them because their kids were like, what is a Democrat? What is a Republican? Like, I actually don't really know. Right.
Well, I want to talk. I hate to keep talking about something else, but I want to keep talking about this. Because when I started in politics, you had to be registered in one of the two parties to vote in the primaries. And so people voted, they registered Democrat, and then the Republicans opened their primaries. And for about a decade or so, they allowed unaffiliated voters to vote in it. And it wasn't until like 1998 or so that Democrats started allowing people, unaffiliated, maybe even after that, to vote in Democratic primaries. And one of the reasons they did it was because people were voting and they were seeing that people were voting who were registered unaffiliated were voting Republican, and then they were sticking with those candidates in the general election because they got a little bit invested in it. So Democrats, as a way of self defense, almost opened up the process to unaffiliateds, and but it started a trend early on that a lot for years most of the unaffiliateds were conservative unaffiliateds. And then it has shifted in recent years where I think younger people, and it's not just in North Carolina, it's across the country, younger people just aren't affiliating with parties. Even if they're voting overwhelmingly Democratic, they're still not affiliating with party. They're not affiliating with anything. They're not, we've seen the demise of like civic organizations. There's no people aren't coming out, they're not joining Rotary clubs or Civitan clubs or anything that were kind of mainstays of small towns and even cities that as civic organizations. And they're, I think they're engaging in other ways, but it's not necessarily in these real structured ways. And I think they see parties a little bit as that.
Yeah, we
So
are, man. Like, I mean, I think that a lot of people are anti the man right now, and political
yeah,
parties are institutions. But that's also the scary thing. Like, even when you look at polls that came out recently, and this goes back to the whole conversation that I think you want to get to, which is going to be about RFK. But like, when you looked at the type of people that folks trust right now, your doctor, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliateds, all like 85% trust their doctor to give them information about what's going on. And then you go down the list at institutions and it gets less and less and less. And then you go to RFK Jr. and Donald Trump, and Republicans are off the charts with trusting a person over an institution right now. And I think that that is the same thing that you can see like permeating right amongst younger people too. The aspect of like it's because of how I think that we are also like institutions have not necessarily been the way that we have found ourselves to make ends meet or advantages in life. And so I don't know, there's a lot to unpack there with that, I feel like. But it was just interesting to see those studies come out this last week about like people even in the Republican Party right now are like Donald Trump controls the CDC, right? And they still don't trust the CDC. They trust Donald Trump, which is just I think a telling point, you know?
Yeah. And you hit on RFK, and Travis, beforehand, we were talking a little bit about RFK's visit to Congress yesterday, and Travis had, I thought, some kind of interesting thoughts about that. Can you help us transition into that?
I didn't watch a ton of it, but we're seeing some Republican senators taking him to task, as if anything else was expected from this man. I miss me with the "you fooled me, Robert F. Kennedy. I didn't realize you were going to come after vaccines." What the hell program were y'all watching? Because I mean,
Right.
you're not a fool. If you get fooled by Robert F. Kennedy, you deserve to get fooled.
But it's political theater, which is what Republicans are so good at, right? Like John Barrasso from Wyoming, right, got up there and he was like, I'm a doctor. I never thought that vaccines would, like, I've always been pro-vaccines. And I was like, you put RFK Jr. in charge of this shit. Like, how on earth did you expect this to be any different? And he didn't, right? He's just doing it now because he's like, oh, I'm worried about getting reelected. It's the same thing with a Republican senator in Louisiana. And I'm like, something that Democrats, I think, actually have and needed to be better at, right? That we're now seeing from a lot of our elected officials, at least I think in Congress, even though people have feelings about Jasmine Crockett, I'm like, I think she does a great job of like performance. And I'm like, we kind of need a little bit more of that because that's exactly what we saw, I think, from Republican senators harassing RFK Jr. is they're like, I know I've got to get reelected, so I'm going to come after your ass, but don't worry, I'm there to back you up with this vote every fucking time you need it. Like, and that's what it is. They're like, CNN's going to film this, right? Like, we're going to be sitting up here. And Elizabeth Warren, I think, gave the best, like, just go in at RFK the other day and he came back at her and he was like, well, you didn't even want her appointed. Like, why do you have a problem with me firing the CDC director? And she goes, because I thought that she would bend the knee to you and Donald Trump. And actually, she stood up for the principles of this organization and you still fired her. Like, you were the one that came to me and said that she was the most well-known qualified person to be in this position. I didn't. And it just, I don't know. I think it speaks volumes to how Republicans are playing politics right now, or at least trying to, because they know they're going to get their asses kicked in the 26 midterms, to Thomas's point earlier.
Well, the thing about the vaccines, I think, is it's scary.
Yep.
Florida, my new favorite state, just announced that they were going to, the Surgeon General recommended anyhow down there that they do away with the whole childhood vaccine protocol.
Yeah, all of them. Let's be real clear. All of them. No requirements for any student going to a public Florida school to get any vaccine.
Right.
It hasn't happened yet, but that's the proposal.
Somebody pointed out about 20 years ago, one kid with the measles went to Disneyland in California, and you had this massive outbreak all over the place. And it's like they said, and there's so many millions of people going to Disney World in Tampa, and you're going to have an entire population of the state running around without measles vaccines. They're going to kill people. Not only are they going to kill people, they're going to kill children, and nobody cares. So the one thing that's going to fix red states is that they're going to kill themselves, just like they did in COVID. They killed themselves, and they still think they're right. The death rate in areas where Republicans were, where they were not taking the vaccine, is so much higher than anywhere where in blue states and blue count municipalities. They would rather score political points than they would protect their people. And that's really dangerous stuff. So, I don't know. I guess people will continue going to Florida because of the climate and everything. But at some point, it seems like people would say, am I going to really send my kid to an area where they're running around with polio and diseases that we thought were basically gone because they decided that it was too political, you know?
Well, and I don't know, maybe they have already, but I was like, that's surprising that like Disney World's not trying to get involved with something like that again, sort of what they did with the
Right.
anti-LGBTQ backlash that they saw out of Florida and the proposals, right, to like move Disney if they had to and everything. I don't know. I feel like this would be the thing because to your point, like Thomas, they are going to kill people with this, and it's going to be coming into parks. It's going to be coming into businesses. I'm surprised that the Chamber of Commerce wouldn't have more of like a visceral reaction to this too in the state of Florida, to be honest.
Yeah, and I'm surprised. You know, there may be a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know, because when I saw what that guy said, I was kind of shocked. And
I mean,
you know,
I'll be honest with you. You got counties in North Carolina right now that got rid of fluoride. I'm like,
right, right,
maybe people are ready to just be like, okay, we're going to go out and kill people. I think that that's what the big bad bill passage kind of meant in DC, right? I had a woman that called Goodwin House yesterday, and I don't normally answer the phones there, but like somehow I was like, oh, I get to be a receptionist for a moment. I'm sitting there being like, no, North Carolina Democratic Party headquarters, and this woman starts talking to me about. She's like, can you put me in touch with anybody in DHHS or anywhere that can tell me what's going to happen with Medicaid? She says like my husband is as Alzheimer's, like I don't know how we're going to meet, like how we're going to do this. She said, I'm not poor enough to qualify for anything else, and I'm not rich enough to do anything else. And it was like the dynamic of the missing middle right now that Republicans in Congress are going to push into such unknown circumstances for the fact that they're not going to be able to have retirement savings anymore because they're going to have to take care of the people in their lives. And like that sandwich generation, honestly, that I think both of y'all have talked about on this podcast before too, but it became even more real to me of just like of hearing from so many folks over the last couple of weeks that have been contacting us because they're like, what do we do? You know, and who do we advocate for right now in the state? And I'm kind of looking at it like I've got a Republican-led General Assembly that is super excited about these cuts. And then I've also got Republican members, majority members in Congress right now that are saying the same thing. And I think for me, sometimes I'm like, how do I tell people the right place to go to advocate right now too? Because I'm like, Republicans, I can't believe our state legislature, honestly, even though I know these people voted to put them in the positions that they're in, would listen to their own constituents and still be like, we don't care. Like, we're not going to have an answer for you. I don't know.
well, it's scary stuff though. I mean, some of the stuff that's coming out of the Republican, mainly Congress, but I mean, even in the legislature, you know, you've got these folks.
It's a shame. I mean, it didn't have to be vaccines, right? There are
Right.
plenty of things that the Make America Healthy Again movement, RFK's movement, espouses that I can get on board with, be it being more restrictive in food regulations, for example, and attacking ultra processed foods, which are clearly linked to obesity, and obesity is clearly linked to most of the health problems in this country. Other things that just to try to make us healthier. I mean, the only surefire way to massively lower health spending in this country, and that's to a large extent what the Medicaid cuts are about, is like, this is too expensive. We cannot pay for all this. The way to do it is to get healthier. And the way to get healthier is to change what we eat. And yeah, there's a personal responsibility argument there. But I think I can speak for everybody who is overweight. That's hard. We could use some help. And it's a shame that that's not what Robert F. Kennedy came into the administration guns blazing on, and instead picked a problem we already solved. We already solved vaccines, y'all. That they work. We can talk about new ones when they come on. I understand how angry people got about the COVID area, and I'm not looking to unlock that debate. But as far as like, hey, this is new and you have to take it, yeah, I get it. I hear you. But man, the backlash on these things, primarily because of a falsified study about autism and vaccines from 25 or whatever years ago. It's just it's such a foolish way to do science, because it's not science. So
Right.
and we've talked about this before. It's just kind of the killing of the truth. People just kind of throw their hands up and say, I guess I can't know what's true because this person says this and this person says this. And the people who engage in that kind of behavior, are really doing this country a massive disservice.
And the I think some of the issue with the Maha stuff is it is rooted in some things we ought to be thinking about. Back to your thing about the processed food. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I got involved with organic growing organic vegetables, and people, man, they thought we were nuts. And the main thing we were talking about was making money, because we were able to sell stuff to restaurants and it took off, not because people wanted to be uber healthy. I mean, I think that was a side effect, but they wanted good vegetables. They wanted things that were that tasted good. And there is a thing about too much. I mean, agricultural runoff into streams. You've got to mitigate that somehow. And having healthier food should not be an ideological issue. It should be something that we have to figure out how to reach a balance to where we can actually feed the world, and at the same time make sure that we're not doing things that are poisoning our ecosystem.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, people used to say that you could drink Roundup, that it was that harmless. And now there are people that they're suing people for Roundup. But before that, you still got the
Travis's face is my face on this. You can drink Roundup.
that's what they
Bobby
were saying.
Kennedy drinks some Roundup, y'all think?
They used to tell you it was totally harmless.
Ugh.
And the other thing, same thing with the DDT. They used to prove that it was true. They had kids running behind trucks being sprayed DDT. And you can go watch those videos. They're running behind the trucks. They were killing mosquitoes, mainly down in the deep South. But their kids running behind them, and they're saying, "See, it's a harmless thing." And it turns out that no, it's not harmless. And there's a lot that's like that we find out more. So there's a point to some of what the Maha groups are talking about. But what has happened is it's become politicized, and it's not necessarily rooted in science anymore. It's rooted in speculation and rumor and fear mongering. And there's some sort of balance that we need to get back to that says, yeah, we need to keep things safe. And, I'm a believer that we need to do I'm not a believer that we need to add chemicals to everything. I think we need to figure out how to do less, and live a little bit healthier. But I also think that we need to be able to protect ourselves, and we need to be able to feed everybody. And those are some contradictions and compromises that have to be made.
Yeah, food and agriculture policy, not simple things. Talk to a farmer, and they will tell you that it don't just show up on your table. So
No, it doesn't.
Thank you to the people who make it happen.
Right. And if you shut down too much, you end up starving a lot of people, because a lot of this food does not end up here in the United States. A lot of it ends up in other people's. We're able
Well,
to feed
unless you pass a bunch of restrictive tariffs and ignite a trade war,
right,
and then
get
China
rid of
doesn't want your soybeans, and so what are we going to do with all our soybeans? Oh, I don't know. Maybe I guess we need a few $100 million or a few $1 billion in subsidy payments for farmers, because we've blown up the soybean market, which is a big deal in North Carolina.
It's a big deal.
Soybean is what, number 3 crop here, and I mean China the number 1 customer, and they aren't buying any of them. So
right.
no.
And they're plowing under tomatoes down in Florida because they can't afford the people to pick them.
Brilliant.
It's like anyhow. Well, let's move on. We got probably time for one more topic, and one near and dear to my heart is the jobs report that came out today, and it said that we only created 22,000 jobs, and they expected 75,000 jobs. They also revised June's jobs report down to where we actually lost 13,000 jobs. Trumponomics is not working. And the working folks are about to pay the price for it. You know, they told us they were going to do all these things. They were going to start deporting all these people. They were going to put tariffs up that made manufacturing jump. They were going to lay off federal employees who could make up for all the migrants that are leaving the workforce. None of it happened. Instead, we have the highest unemployment rate we've had in years, and it's going up, and the jobs aren't coming back. You know, and the one thing I read is that it's not too late, but what you would have to do is basically do a 180, and Republicans would have to get rid of all this isolationist, protectionist trade and embrace kind of the free market stuff that we had forever. And you know, they're just not going to do that. They are too beholden to Donald Trump and their crazy ass base.
Yeah, there was Tim Moore that said maybe we ought to pay a little bit more for things in order to create jobs from these tariffs. And so, I mean, I think it ended up working out just in the way that they anticipated it to, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll withhold some judgment, though, because we just don't know what Donald Trump will do on foreign policy tariffs. You know, you can't know what's coming next. This could be a massive gambit. There is some evidence of some onshoring, but the latest jobs report 7,000 decrease in manufacturing. Obviously, that's not the way you want to
Yep.
see it go. I wonder how much of this latest job report, and again, you know, the numbers, they're always a moving target, and they get nailed down months later. But I wonder how much of it is AI and just or two real things. One, you know, less confidence in the future of the economy, which slows hiring in general, and then CEOs, executives looking at how they're using AI and saying, maybe I'll leave some of these entry-level jobs open. AI can kind of fill the holes there. I saw a story in the Wall Street Journal where basically CEOs are bragging about lower employee counts and how they're getting productivity out of things in large part because they're using more artificial intelligence. I don't know that we know how that's going to go, but I do know this: the value, the economic value in artificial intelligence is that it replaces talent, it replaces labor. You know, it replaces the cost of labor. Otherwise, you don't really have a use for it if it doesn't save money as a business. How does it save money as a business? It gets rid of you. You know,
Yep.
that
Well,
that's
I'm
what
like,
it
that is
does.
true. If that's how we want to build economies where like corporations win and then the people on the ground are still the ones that suffer. Again, I think Tim Moore did his job and Donald Trump's doing it too right now, right? Because it's not going to be an economy that's sustained for people in communities. And to y'all's point, the entire thing we just went through the last 4 years, that honestly, I saw Republican legislators and members of Congress in districts handing out big checks, really excited about bringing manufacturing back to communities all
Right.
across the country for them 4 years later to be like, or 2 years later, or even a year later to be like, we're okay with manufacturing losses sliding back into oblivion. I don't know. I just think that's a very big turnaround for a party that was super excited to hand it to communities at one point.
Well, the thing about Donald Trump is he didn't have to do much of anything. He could have just ridden out what Biden was doing, take advantage of the economic benefits of the CHIPS Act, the
And have taken credit
Infrastructure
for it.
Act. What's that?
And have taken credit for it.
Right, and
Like, it actually would have been in
could have
place
taken
during
credit
his
for it.
presidency.
Exactly. He didn't have to do anything. Instead, he decided that he had to break something. So what did he break? He's broken the entire trade thing. I was telling Travis before, it's pretty amazing to me because I lived through the 80s where we were very skeptical on the left of the whole free trade thing at the beginning, and we were pro union. We weren't it wasn't hardcore protectionists, but we felt like we needed to protect certain industries, the auto industry. Down here in the South, we were protecting textiles and we were protecting furniture, and then they basically won. the Republicans won the argument. Bill Clinton signed NAFTA, and within 10 years, almost every Democrat was basically free trade. And the argument stopped being about how do we create wealth. We were creating it. We were the wealthiest. We quickly became not just the wealthiest country of the world, but the most successful economic country in the world. And the fight became, how do we distribute the wealth? How do we make sure that it's not concentrated in too many hands and that too many people are being left behind? And Democrats wanted to build things like a national health system. Obamacare is that as a result of that. We wanted a strong social safety net. Republicans said, no, 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 we can't have all that. Instead, we have to let everybody keep what they earn. And that's the best way to do it. And it didn't. It left so many people behind. And nobody did a great job. Nobody did a great job of taking care of the people who lost when Republicans won that free trade war. But we basically all embraced it. And Donald Trump threw it out in one damn term. Republicans resisted it in his first term. We got back to normal. We started doing the same thing again, and it started working again. We started, inflation hurt us, but we were basically growing economically. We were creating a record number of jobs, and everything was kind of humming along. And by the time Biden left, inflation was pretty much in check. And then the Republican Party, the people who brought free trade, the people who told us that free markets were the answer to everything, said, nah, we were wrong. We're going to let Donald Trump go throw everything out the window, and we're going to start the hell over. And that's where we are now. And the question is, are they going to come to their senses? And are they going to step up and put some brakes on that guy? Or are they going to let him go ahead and run us all the way off the mountain? And that's what I'm worried about. That I don't believe they have. I believe it is a party of cowards, grifters, and charlatans. And we have got to beat them because they are literally driving the country off the damn mountain. And that's what I think. So
that's solid. I don't know that you need to be so mean to the people of Charlotte, though. I mean, there's some good people in Charlotte. There's some good charlatans.
Oh.
Those are charlatans, Travis.
Come
charlatans. And
charlatans. That's not how you say it, baby. Come on now.
But anyhow.
The thing that I said throughout Western North Carolina, everywhere I went, my dad used to work at Jones Fabric in Hickory before they shut down and everything. And 2007, my dad lost his job after all of that had finally, textiles really had left North Carolina in so many ways. And I agree with you, Thomas, to everything you said. I just think there is everywhere I went, I said that because it validated me with people that were there who had also, their families had been through the same thing where I remember my dad being out of work for 2 years, and it was the worst 2 years I think he'd ever went through in his life because
right.
He grew up on a tobacco farm. He was, the person that always did something with his hands. And that felt like that went away when that happened. And I don't know that our party's ever had a real, and I think, honestly, Travis, I feel like you were the one that said this to me originally. You were like, we never came back in and actually fulfilled promises that we made about jobs and what was going to come in after that. And I don't know. I still think there's a missing storyline there that Joe Biden tried to fulfill in some ways, but I don't know that he ever really made it there either yet with people that had really felt like this party had screwed them over and screwed their families. And to your point, the opportunity for generational wealth to accumulate and everything else too. So I don't know.
Well, it's a hard story in those communities because it is hard to fill the gaps. I just felt like the people who benefited so much from the whole free trade thing should have been paying to make sure those people didn't take it on the chin quite as hard. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know what exactly it looks like. Was it direct cash payments or what? But I'm from one of those communities that Wadesboro was basically boarded up. It's starting to come back, some because Charlotte's gotten that far east now, but it packed up and left. The textile mills were gone, and the town shut their doors and boarded their windows. It's hard to watch.
God, y'all ever heard that song, The Little Man? That's what that reminds me of right there when you just said that. The town boarded itself up and everything. If you haven't heard it, go listen to it. Toby Keith will do you right. Anyway.
Okay.
That's what I got.
All right. Well, listen, I sure do appreciate it. Travis and Anderson, let's try to do it in a couple of weeks. I thank you, everybody, for listening. This is Thomas Mills signing off for Politics NC.